Hold on to your valuables, people. It's the all-new Davis and Davis Show. Drop whatever the heck you're doing and grab your friends, grab your family, heck, grab your pets, and sit them the heck down to listen to the most adrenaline-filled kick-butt podcast in the world. Bust open that liquor cabinet, grab the most expensive stuff that you have, pour it in a pint glass, and chug that stuff down. The new Davis and Davis Show is about to melt your face off.
Go to davisanddavisshow.com for links to this podcast. Listen at your own risk.
Hi guys, I'm Bree.
And I'm Allie. This is Offscript.
If you think about it, books are potential scripts for movies.
When this adaptation happens, typically it's disappointing because they went off script.
In this series, we will be talking about how off script they went. Hello and welcome to Offscript. I'm Bree.
I'm Allie.
And today we are joined by two lovely ladies. We've got Carol and Linda with us. I almost said with me.
Wow, just cutting me out. All right.
Would you lovely ladies like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Carol Ford, and I am one of the co-authors of Bob Crane, the Definitive Biography. Bob Crane was the star of Hogan's Heroes, which was a 1960s television situation comedy, which took place during World War II in a German POW camp. I am also the senior director of editorial services for a publishing firm, a healthcare publishing firm. That's kind of me in a nutshell. And so, hi.
Hello.
Hello. I am Linda Groundwater. I am an American living in Australia. I've been here for 30 some odd years now. I am one of the co-authors of the Bob Crane biography. In my former life, I was a radio journalist, and in my current life, I am a home loan writer for the bank.
What drew you to Australia, apart from, Australia?
My husband's from here.
Okay. Yep, that's a big draw.
My husband wanted to come home because he didn't like the snow up in New Hampshire, and that's it. Once that you can get the boy out of Queensland, but you can't get Queensland out of the boy, so he wanted to come home.
That's like my dream vacation is Australia and New Zealand area. I'm like, I want to go there so bad one day.
It's a long haul. It's a very long haul.
Here. The nature, people, I actually had people who I thought were fairly educated asked me if we just had kangaroos bouncing up and down the street. The answer is generally in the suburbs, no. We do have, you do have kangaroos around, you do have koalas around, but they don't just tend to wander up and down your standard suburb streets. But occasionally you will see one in an odd place.
Wow.
But if you go out into the what they call the red center, because it's not very populated in the middle, it's the desert in the middle, it is absolutely stunning. Uluru and the Olgas and rocks that look massive to you because they go up a kilometer up, but they're actually going 3 or 4 kilometers underground.
Wow.
They're lying on their side. So what you're seeing is actually the side, not the full.
Wow. That's amazing.
It is the most beautiful. It's probably the most beautiful place on earth that I've ever seen.
I'm in New Jersey.
And there goes the conversation.
Free vacation.
I've been to New York.
There's a lot of great places in New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Well, okay. How did you ladies meet to make this book?
I'll let Linda start on that one.
Way back in 2002, 2003, I was hanging out at my mother-in-law's house and I watched Hogan's Heroes because she had cable, which at the time was not a huge thing here in Australia. And Hogan's Heroes came on and I said, oh my goodness, I haven't seen this show in decades. I grew up watching it, but you lose that. You get a life, you move countries, you're done. And I said, gosh, I remembered all the stories and I remembered all the characters, and I kind of fell right back into it because it was enjoyable to watch. It kind of, it hasn't been off the air since then, by the way. So in the past 22 years, I am still seeing it on TV every day.
Wow.
And I said, gee, I remember that Bob Crane died, but I didn't remember how, because I'm pleased to say I was quite young when he passed. And all I remembered that I wasn't allowed to really read the papers much about it. Not that I would have cared at that age anyway. But so I came home and I went on the internet and I went, ooh, okay, he was murdered. And it wasn't pretty. No murder is pretty, but it was very unattractive. But buried under it, all I saw was sex and murder in Hogan's Heroes, and sex and murder in Hogan's Heroes. And I said, this is ridiculous, and there must be more to him than this. And I dug a little deeper, and further down, I would find things like theater and radio and drumming and music and Connecticut and charity. And I said, well, this is the stuff I want to know. I'm a journalist. I don't care about all the sensational stuff. I do find sensational stuff meaty. As a journalist, you go, and you just grab it. But what I always liked to do was, find out what's beneath that headline. And so I read those bits and I said, well, this is the stuff people should be hearing about. This is the stuff that you don't hear about. And I didn't know that at the time there was a film coming out called Autofocus, which I can throw up about later. I just said, well, this isn't fair. This is this, people need to know everything. And I don't think anyone should ever be judged by one thing, with some exceptions. So most people should not be known just for one thing, especially when it's something out of their control, like being killed. So I said, that's not fair. I need to do something about that. I, way down here in Australia, said, I'm just one little person. I have no idea what possessed me. But then I started a little journey, and I got in touch with Bob's cousin, and I got in touch with Dee Young, who's the third author, the third person in our research and writing team. And she led me to some people. And then I went online in a little thing called Yahoo Groups. Yahoo Groups, but Yahoo Groups was a thing. So I went on Yahoo Groups, and there was a Hogan's Heroes Yahoo group, and I said, look, if there's anybody out, this is what I'm doing, folks, and I want to hear anything from anyone. I don't care if it's good, bad, or in between. I don't care if I care if it's true or false, but if you don't know, just give me the info and I'm going to dig. And Carol happened to be on that Yahoo group, and she said, good luck with that. Here, I'm ready to start.
That's exactly right. And that Yahoo group was actually something that I started with two other Hogan's Heroes fans, because we were all we were at that time, it was the very, very late 90s, very, very early 2000s. And, this predates MySpace. This is something that before all of these social media sites, came into being and took off. But going back even further, Linda had rediscovered Hogan's Heroes at a time in her life in the early 2000s. I had kind of done the same, but back in the 80s was when I first kind of discovered Hogan's Heroes myself. It was around 1984, 85. And I learned that Bob Crane had been murdered. And so I was very young. I was 14 years old, 15 years old, somewhere in there. And I remember going, this is just terrible, because all that there was back then were little snippets in little tiny magazines that would say things like, Bob Crane was murdered, the crime remains unsolved to this day. And nobody kills Colonel Hogan, right? So, so me and my little 14-year-old sleuth mind was like, I'm going to solve it. And so I started going to the library and going into the microfilm rooms and microfiche rooms, and just making copies of the obituary and some other news articles. And this is before anything was coming out about much of anything. There was no trial, and we'll get into all of that later, as far as the man that the police, law enforcement believe killed Bob. So this is mid 1980s. The crime is officially under investigation. Bob died in 1978. So it's about 6 or 7 years away from that, which back then to a little kid is a long time.
Yeah.
But when you look at it now, it was 5 years ago that we were in COVID. So it's almost about the same amount of time from when Bob.
And that feels like just yesterday.
It does feel like just yesterday. So fast forward to when Linda comes on Yahoo Groups, and she's saying, is there anybody who, wants, knows anything, knows anybody, might be connected with somebody, because she's just putting feelers out. And I did. That's exactly what I said, because I had already seen that autofocus was out. I had seen it. It was horrible. We'll get into that later. I just come out and say it.
Slow about that.
I just come out and say it. Linda was a little bit more.
No, I mean the film didn't really. I think it might have come into one theater and disappeared because it did so well overseas. Just as
so the film was actually an adaptation of a book called The Murder of Bob Crane by a biographer, not a biographer, but a criminologist, Robert Graysmith, who also wrote the book The Zodiac Killer and was very involved with the Zodiac Killer and trying to solve that case. So he got very much embroiled into the Zodiac Killer investigation. He wrote the book about it. He had written other books as well, but he had just for some reason, he maybe even the same as Linda and me, liked Hogan's Heroes and wanted to get more involved with it. And unfortunately for Robert Graysmith is he did the criminology part fairly well. The biography part of it, he did horribly. And so unfortunately that
there was no
mesh. No, there was none.
Checking on his.
No!
When it came to the biography part, and so that book came out in the early 1990s. You fast forward to 2002, 2003. Linda is now it's 2004, 2005, and she's trying to get this off the ground. And I'm going, oh man! So, but we connected. Good luck with that, because and to this day. It is still a runaway train, and we have a lot. We have our book. We have tons of resources. We have the family. We are the official biographers, as deemed that by the estate and by his family. But we still can't break past the film that has become the Bible of sorts of Bob Crane's life and death, and so. Linda and I connected up, and between Linda and Dee Young and Dee was instrumental in getting us all of Connecticut radio, because Connecticut radio was massive. Radio in general was massive for Bob's getting his start and becoming as successful as he was. And Linda had all of Connecticut radio. She worked at WICC for over 40 years. She met Bob when he came back to the station to celebrate its anniversary, its 50th anniversary. So there was a lot of work that Dee did as well. And so the three of us, we would have these interviews, and this is back before Zoom, before Google Meet, before all of this. And we would have, I would have, cords and wires hanging all over the house because we would be recording these interviews. And Linda's calling, she's calling in from Australia. I'm here on the East Coast.
1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning.
and kind of like what we are doing here, because you're West Coast, Linda's in Australia, I'm over here in the lovely state of New Jersey, and we're trying to coordinate all of these. At one point, we had 4 different time zones out for one. Oh my God! And so coordinating all of that and finding the people and getting to be in touch with people almost immediately, because people would call me. They weren't going to call Australia. They just weren't. So they were going to call me. One person did. Yes, they did. And it was a very important
person did.
So we worked. The three of us worked very, very well and very closely together. Linda came at it from her investigative side. Dee came from it from her Connecticut radio connections. And I came from it from a publisher, author. Linda's an author as well, but I am in the up to my eyeballs in publishing every single day. And so between the three of us, we were able to produce this work, which, you know, it's not just a biography in that, oh, we're just going to sit down and write a celebrity biography. Who wants to contribute? This kind of became a way of life in that it became, it really did, because Bob's timeline started to just kind of run alongside of ours, because we can talk about his life as easily as we can talk about ours. And we also became so close to the people that were part of his life, his family, his friends, his coworkers, and they became part of this. So they would say things like, we're in this with you. We want to clear his name. We want to make sure that people know the truth about him. We're not here to sugarcoat, but what they've done to him is just so unconscionable that we want to help clear his name. And so to this day, it's almost exactly 10 years since the book came out. It came out on the 50th anniversary of Hogan's Heroes, and we are still here talking about Bob Crane, because it is important to make sure that people understand that, we're not letting it go. It wasn't just a flash in the pan. We care about him. We care about his family. We care about his friends and colleagues. We care about the truth. And that truth is so very easily glossed over, because up comes this film and everybody says, oh, but did you see autofocus? And, we have to do a lot of damage control.
Yeah. I want to add too, if I may, just something Carol said earlier, and people tend to think funny things about it, is we are Bob's official biographers as designated by his estate, which was a great honor for us. But that came after. So nothing that we did and nothing that we wrote, and even now nothing that we talk about, because we stick to pretty much what's in the book and any additional interviews we've done later, was influenced by Bob's family or his estate.
Wow.
Bob's son Scott was 7 or 8 years old when his father was killed.
That's so hard.
He obviously knows huge amounts about him. But some of these things about work and background and these bits and pieces, we dug so deep. There was nothing that was too small for us to look into. Everything was verified. If it couldn't be verified, we said that it couldn't be verified. But the distinction of being his official biographer came after the book was done. People may think, oh, you do whatever the family says. You're just painting him in a better light because that's what the family wants. We only paint him in a full light. We're just not just looking at one side. One of the people that knew Bob said, and we used it as one of the title of one of the chapters, is looking at these things is like looking at the specks on the Parthenon. We need to concentrate on the Parthenon and not on the specks.
Right.
It was a beautiful way of putting it. And I loved this man. That was Joe. And I loved that man because he really got it. People look at Bob and they go, oh, he was a sex addict. Or they don't actually say that. They say he was a perv. He was into porn and he did this, that. They don't say he was an addict. There's a lot of stuff in people's lives that nobody wants public. If Bob had lived, the likelihood of this all getting out would have been very slim.
Yeah.
He's trying to change it. And he tried many times to change it, and he was making a renewed and very strong effort at the time of his death to change it. But we don't paint him in those three lights, Hogan's Heroes, sex, and murder. We paint him as the whole person. And after that, the estate said,
that's amazing. Wow. You basically gave a voice to the victim rather than just letting
absolutely
everything go with it. Yeah.
He's not seen as a victim. I'll let Carol get to that because that's it's a big thing for both of us, but she speaks it better. I just get cranky.
No. I think we both do. No. I want to say, to follow up on Linda, yes, Bob was a sexual addict, and people they don't want to listen to the word addict. They just see, creep, But what also filters into all of that is, and we see it everywhere today, and it's all over the media. They'll say he was a pedophile. They'll say he was gay. They'll say he was forcing women, raping women, doing all these things. And it is extremely important to say he was none of those things. What Bob was doing was he was having consensual sex with adult women who, when he asked them, knew they were going to be either photographed or videotaped. He got their consent for all of it. But people today, we all have our little phones, right? And the camera on there, or you can put a pin camera anywhere. Back then, that was not the case. Didn't matter how much money you had. The people who had those kinds of devices were in, foreign espionage, right? The cameras that Bob had, and Bob didn't make a secret of it. He was, doing this in a way that, you walked into his apartment, and if you look at the crime scene photos are out there on the internet. It's unfortunate because they are very, very disturbing. And I can't imagine if that were my loved one, that were my father, my uncle, my brother, whomever. And these very graphic images are out there. But that being said, the pictures of the apartment are all out there as well. So the other rooms, and right in the living room is a camera the size of my computer monitor on a tripod, and it's sitting right there. So there is absolutely no question of what Bob was going for when
everywhere.
Right, it was everywhere.
Photography stuff everywhere, video everywhere. I don't know what people think recording in secret is. It's not like stuff. There was no way. The women said no. He just went okay.
It was not about hurting anybody.
It wasn't about conquest. It was addiction.
Right.
It was addiction.
Yeah, right.
It was about, Allie, do you want to? And you say no. And Bree, would you? Yes. Okay, come on. That's what it was. And it was not something where he wanted to hurt anybody. He did not want to force anybody. Bob was not somebody who endured pain himself. If he got a paper cut, he was, it was like, oh my gosh, blood, it was not something that he did not have a high tolerance for pain, from what we were told. And so, the fact that, there's all the, whatever he was doing with regard to that wasn't part of it. The pain part wasn't it. And he wasn't out to hurt. So it was consensual adult women, no kids. He wasn't gay, and if he was and it was consensual, it wouldn't have mattered. But
exactly.
But he wasn't, and so to tell the truth, you have to say he was with adult women. The end. All of the film and all of the pictures that he had, not that Linda and I looked through a lot of them because, it's kind of like, okay.
Right.
But
One has seen them all, really?
Yes.
They didn't have anything that I didn't have. Maybe a bit more of.
Definitely something where he was wanting the whole session to be enjoyable and not something that was he was coming across as being forceful, hurtful, painful, or any of those things. And it was absolutely not kids. So to that end, it was a sexual addiction. It started as early as the 1950s. It wasn't because Bob lived in Connecticut. He lived in Cornell, New York for a short period of time when he worked in radio, right when he first got his first job in radio, came back to Connecticut, but otherwise he was born and raised in Connecticut, worked in Connecticut at WICC in Bridgeport. And then from there, he moves out west because he gets a call from KNX, CBS Radio. It's a big deal. It's a big deal for conservative Connecticut to come to Los Angeles, Hollywood, and all of that in the 1950s. And so he does in 1956. And it's not a case where when he got out to Hollywood and he gets into acting after about 5 years after working at the radio station, he gets some acting roles and then lands the big role of Colonel Hogan on Hogan's Heroes. And the idea that people think, oh, well, he got to Hollywood and just went crazy and couldn't control himself. Oh, it's all, he just went to his head. And that is absolutely not true. In fact, Bob was very much in control, from what we have been told by many people who knew him, that he was almost like a control freak. He was very in control. This sexual addiction started way back in the early 50s when his cousin was even talking about hearing stories at WICC, because his cousin Jim Senich worked in radio as well. And, he would hear these stories and he was
unsure. He had no idea.
No.
He hid that very well from his family. He didn't want people to know, which is why it's particularly hard now that not only did it come out a bit when he died, but then it just exploded up. The movie made a mess of things, and now his worst nightmare came true after his death, and he is not.
Well, his family sees that.
He's not here to put it back in the box. And I have spent time with both his youngest son and Scott and his daughter Karen, and they have both said to me, the things that people have said to them are absolutely absolutely. Got what he deserved, didn't he?
My God.
Would you like that if somebody said that about somebody you love? I mean, this is their father, for heaven's sake, and Bob immediately, as soon as that addiction became more widely known in the open community, it was known somewhat within the acting community, within his circles, but I guess it was a little hard to not notice at some point. But once it exploded beyond that, Bob ceased to be a victim. If you know, for your listeners who may not know how he died, he was bludgeoned to death in his sleep. Which is like, thank God, because Bob had a very low tolerance, as we said.
That would have been
bad. The fact that he was asleep makes its own curiosities to the crime, but he was a very, very light sleeper, to the point where it would be hard for someone to get in there if he didn't know them, and feel comfortable with them around him. He was bludgeoned to death in his sleep. It was a horrible crime scene. They mishandled the crime scene incredibly badly.
Of course,
the photos, the way people traipsed in and out, the way they moved and literally climbed on the body. If you ever watched, a small plug here, but if you ever watched the TV show Autopsy: The Last Hours of with Michael Hunter, they did an episode about Bob Crane, which they interviewed me for.
Oh, wow. Cool.
As well as some other people. But in that, they actually used some of the crime scene video, because they took video of that crime scene, of what was going on.
Yeah.
And you can see the medical examiner, while Bob is lying in a fetal position on the bed, which is how he was killed. He was lying on his side asleep, and they just bashed him in the head. And the medical examiner then climbs up onto the bed and starts shaving around the back of his arm, like he hasn't left the scene. It was so badly handled. The person who was called to identify him at that time, like obviously his family was requested to come out after, but the Reverend Ed Beck, who was working at the Windmill Dinner Theater in Scottsdale, Arizona at the time, and he was the person he was a chaplain, and he was also the manager at the theater, and his job was to look after the needs of the actors, and kind of give them, when you're a traveling actor, when you're on the road doing dinner theater, it can be a very unsettling period. You're not with your family, you're not at home, you're not on a set for 2 or 3 months, you're bouncing around all over the place. So they had people at this dinner theater, which I think is lovely. This dinner theater chain had people who were kind of there to help them,
that's sweet,
feel a little more stable and settled. And Bob had gone to him looking for help. originally. So he, of course, knew who Bob was anyway. But he was big ex-Marine, served in Vietnam, big dude.
Like 6'4". I mean, really, really big. Yeah.
Nicest fella ever. God rest his soul, he was a lovely man. And they said to him, would you come and identify that this is Bob? Because where Bob was a condo that belonged to the dinner theater. That's where they put their actors. So they said, would you come? And he said, yes. He said, and I walked into that room and he said, I've seen lots of stuff.
Wow.
He was in NAM. He was a Marine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He said, and I walked into that room and he said, honestly, it was I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he said I almost ran out of the room.
Oh,
because
wow.
what they did with this marvelous sense of how a crime scene should be handled was Bob had been on his side and there was a lot of blood on his face, as you can imagine. So there was blood all over the walls. There was blood all over the ceiling. But what they did, because they said, and Bob's face had swollen from, whatever, they had him rigged up with pulleys and ropes and they pulled his body up in the bed so that he was sitting up.
Oh my God.
And he said, to watch that happen.
Oh no.
He said, it took everything I had not to just turn and run out of the room.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine doing that at a crime scene? What's wrong with you? You should leave the body alone. You want to identify him when he's not in the room. If you really want him identified right away, bring him into the room and see if anything strikes you. And if it doesn't, you wait till, everything is.
You're in the morgue.
You're in the morgue.
Yeah.
They had people using the phone. They had people smoking. They had people wandering in and out. Nobody was wearing gloves. They had nothing on their feet so that they could cover up extra.
People left.
Oh my God.
Things left the room. So
things left. Police academies use Bob's case
to teach
as a lesson to their recruits as what not to do at a crime. That's how badly it was handled.
Wow. Oh,
so what hope was there of any of this ever being done correctly?
I'm a big true crime fan. I'm like hearing everything you just said. I'm like, this is horrifying. This is like, what were they doing?
You don't interfere with the crime scene. You don't let people take things out of the room or take things out of the building. You don't let people use the phone. I know there weren't mobiles in those days, but if you want to use the phone, go out and you use your cop radio or something. Don't let somebody else just come in and pick up the phone and start using the phone. They smoked and it was just, I really don't have words for this crime scene. It was horrendously badly handled. And so, there was never going to be a hope. But what it did also was it just kind of exploded what Bob's life was at that time. And at that time, it was addiction, and it was he had just met with the Reverend Beck to ask for help, and the Reverend Beck said, look, this is not my area. It is and sex addiction is a very, very strong addiction. It is a hard addiction. All addictions tend to be hard anyway, but the way the Reverend Beck explained it, and a few others explained it, was a sex addiction can be as strong as some of your hardest drugs.
Wow.
Because it is dealing with chemicals in your body.
Yeah.
And with a sex addiction, so with cigarettes, for instance, now cigarettes are outlawed in many places. In Australia, you can't walk into a store and see cigarettes. If you see a big white cupboard, they sell cigarettes, but you can't actually see the cigarettes.
Wow.
But they're there because there's a big white cupboard, and there'd be no reason for there to be a big white cupboard unless there were cigarettes. But it's not in your face. Drugs are around, of course, everywhere, but they're not in your face. How do you get away from seeing women?
Right. Yeah, you can't. Wow.
They are half the population or a little more of the earth.
Yeah.
So he can't go somewhere and not see a woman.
Yeah.
And Bob's addiction was sex with women. So it wasn't about whether it was a beautiful woman or a homely woman. It was a woman.
Yeah.
Person feed his addiction.
Yep.
Wow.
And you can't get away from that.
Hmm.
They're everywhere. But he knew that this was a horrible thing. He knew that it destroyed his first marriage. He knew that it was destroying his second marriage. He knew that his children were asking questions and their friends were asking questions. It was becoming more out of control. And he desperately wanted to change that. And so he went to the Reverend Beck, which was like he said, his millionth time. But he said, I really need to do this. And he said, this is okay. I'm going to refer you to people.
Mm-hmm.
And within 2 days, he was dead.
Oh my gosh.
So there was no chance of redemption. so to speak. And there was no chance that was going to stay a secret.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
people-
then he ceased to be a victim. He just became that creepy guy who got what he deserved.
Yep.
And people know about his videotapes. They know about his photographs. They all the dirty pictures, all the naughty stuff. And we will get questions where people will say, "Where are they? Do you know where they are?" And the answer to that, they are gone. They're gone.
Yeah.
Because what happened was when Bob was going to the conversations that Reverend Beck told us was that they discussed there were several layers to it. When you are entering into any recovery program, you have to do what is called surgery. And so you have to start cutting out the things that enable this addiction. And the thing with surgery is that it helps make you better, but it is also very painful. And so he is starting to cut out the enablers, whether it be John Henry Carpenter, who was Bob's, the world wants to say it was his best friend. It was absolutely, John Henry Carpenter was a hanger-on who was, for lack of a better phrase, getting the sloppy seconds. He was hanging around with a celebrity. And so, Bob was, Bob Scott told us that his father had a very, he had a very hard time discerning between who's a good person and who's a bad person. He just wanted everybody to like him. And so he had very poor judgment.
Couldn't judge character at all.
Exactly. And, so he allowed John Carpenter to hang around because John Carpenter worked for Sony. And he was able to get different parts for the cameras, which Bob, oh, good, I can get them at a discount. Okay, fine, we'll go ahead. And so he became an enabler. And so the night that Bob was murdered, a waitress at a diner not far from the dinner theater and not far from the apartment, which, by the way, was in Scottsdale, Arizona. They went to a diner after the production. And so there was a heated conversation of sorts where Bob and John Carpenter, and I have to say it's different from the movie producer. It's John Henry Carpenter, who was a man of Native American heritage who, was from, the Southwest area, but not the movie producer. And so, so he was allegedly starting to take those steps to say to John Carpenter, no, I don't want to do this anymore. And so they think that maybe John Henry Carpenter was the person who killed Bob. And that's what all of this, Linda talked about the crime scene being so mishandled. Part of what happened there was they completely blocked out anybody else who could potentially have been a suspect. Yes, they looked at some other people. Of course, his wife was looked at because everybody's spouse is looked at in a murder investigation, and she was cleared. Some other folks were looked at and were cleared. But John Henry Carpenter was the one who they just kind of zeroed in on. And they brought him to trial in the 1990s, early 1990s, and he was acquitted due to lack of evidence, lack of physical evidence, because the crime scene had been so badly bungled. Now, does that mean he didn't do it? He might not have. He was just a guy that was hanging around, enabling Bob's behavior. and Bob was cutting them out. Bob Crane was not the only celebrity that John Carpenter was hanging around with. He was hanging around with other celebrities. And so, the argument can be made. Would you really just go kill somebody because they said, hey, I don't want to hang out with you anymore? Maybe you'll get a little miffed or,
right.
whatever.
You would hope they wouldn't go kill you. Right?
But all of that leads to, again, the tunnel vision that this case has, and to this day. And you cannot say Bob Crane's name without some sort of ridicule. And I come back to the tapes. Oh, where are they? Do they exist? And the answer is no, because Scotty destroyed those. But, Scott did destroy them for his father. One of the things that Reverend Beck was telling Bob was to go back home to Los Angeles. Here are the people, the psychologists, the therapists that I'm getting you connected with that know how to handle this type of addiction. But one of the things that you're going to have to do is destroy the tapes. That's a big one. And so he was planning to do it himself. Scott only did it within the last 10 years. And part of that was Scott has 2 children who at the time, going back 10 years, he didn't want his kids to find these things of their grandfather and, have this, image of him. But that being said, Bob was going to go back and do it. Scott, when it started to come out that, with autofocus, and we're going to take a really harsh look on that in a second. But autofocus brought all of this back up into the mainstream. And people were then saying that, these women didn't know, Bob was doing it in secret. And Scott did something that was probably the wrong thing to do. He released some of the films.
Probably.
No.
He released some of the films for sale on his website for a very nominal fee, because you have to pay for those things. He said, I did the wrong thing for the right reasons, because he wanted to show the public was that these women were performing, and that there was no, hidden cameras and coercion or anything.
Now smile, now turn around, now think. So it wasn't like they didn't know.
Right.
And so, wow, was that the wrong thing to do?
It was.
It was not the smartest thing.
And if I recall correctly, his mother was a little unimpressed. As Scott's mother was a little unimpressed, but he was doing it for what he thought was a way to exonerate his father from the accusations of, these women didn't know. Now, I will say, sorry, as you can tell, you don't really need to even be here, Carol and I can carry on this.
I was going to say, this is amazing. I love it. Makes our job easier.
Bob was, and this will have to do with the destruction of the tapes too. Bob chronicled everything. Bob was not, he was absolutely OCD. Everything was either filmed, written down, recorded on audio. Every tiny bit of Bob's life was written down or recorded. So for instance, they found in his diary, went to the dentist 2:00, and then it's crossed off. And it says, dentist found, I'm making stuff up here, but it was a dental appointment. I remember that, dentist found plaque on molar going back Thursday. So then on Thursday, this dental appointment for this and that. And then it's crossed appointment changed to this and that, like everything. There were dinner conversations that had like nothing of interest on them. All that stuff is recorded. Like that is some other kind of addiction.
It's also all interspersed.
All those tapes. So the sex was probably like 5% of what Bob was recording.
And it's also all interspersed. So if you're recording your life, because what Bob was doing was recording, he was chronicling his entire life. So if sex is part of your life, it's just as important as the birthday. It's just as important as Christmas. It's just as important as dinner. It's just as important as the dentist. And so, in those tapes, and this is where Scott, he said to me, I know I lost a lot of treasures when I destroyed these tapes, but I wasn't going to sit there and go through and birthday, Christmas, whatever, and whoa, hello, cut that.
Yeah,
right.
Too much of it.
Yeah.
And so he just
And he
keeps
doesn't want to
memories.
remember his
He
father
doesn't-
that way
yes.
either.
No,
you
no,
know?
he doesn't need that.
So that is where that, people think that all Bob did was have sex. And it's not true. Bob had a lot of sex. He had more sex than most people. But well, but it wasn't all that he was doing. And so, like Linda said, if you're looking at a chart of 100%, it was probably a good 5%. But that 5% has been magnified to the point of all else.
Yeah.
To the point of exclusion. He did so much for charity. He worked with the Cerebral Palsy Foundation. He worked with Arthritis Foundation. He worked with the Armed Forces Radio Network. He worked with many different charities. He was always going out and doing all kinds of charitable things. He was very, very supportive of our military and of our veterans. And he would go like Bob Hope would go. He would go to the different bases and he would do comedic stand-up routines, and he would do, he would entertain our troops. You don't hear that. You don't hear that because why? Everything is so laser focused on sex, and it gets to the point where you often wonder, if Bob is just having all of the sex, and his first wife, yes, it helped lead to their divorce, but they were married for 20 years and his wife knew about a lot of his activities and about what he was doing. And his second wife certainly knew. Certainly knew. And so what's going on in their marriages is for them. And if they have an arrangement, and
if they're okay with it, who cares?
Who are we to look in on that world and judge? We talked with four sexual addiction therapists who provided us with a real insight into Bob's sexual addiction. And then another person that contributed to the overall picture, the big picture, was someone who was an expert in men's sexual health. And she made a statement for the book that, society has a way of looking in at, a man's sexual, activities.
Yeah.
And automatically, or anybody's sexual activities, and automatically deeming them inappropriate, like, oh my goodness, we're going to, say, yikes, clutch our pearls, and it's so tight, and you don't really have, that freedom of expression. Where as long as wife number one was okay, wife number two was okay, because Bob and Ann, when his first wife, Anne, when they split, he left her. She didn't leave him.
Oh.
He left her. He actually left Anne no less than 3 times throughout their entire marriage.
Wow.
He felt that they had gotten married too young. And that comes from, his cousin Jim. It comes from his best friend Charlie. It comes from various sources who knew Bob, grew up with Bob in Connecticut. He kept going. He loved Anne. He loved Anne, and Anne loved him. But he felt that they had been married too early. And so when he gets to Hogan's Heroes, he has an affair right away with the first leading lady, who's opposite him, Cynthia Lynn, who plays Colonel Klink's first secretary. And then she leaves the show. And then he has an affair with Colonel Klink's second secretary. And that's who he ends up marrying. But he leaves Anne. Anne doesn't leave him. And so, to look into both of those marriages and judge when you don't have any information about what's going on in those marriages is not for us to judge. And that is something that, when people talk about Bob Crane, they judge him, they judge his morality, they judge his sex, they judge his activities, and they don't really have the whole picture. And when Linda and Dee and I try to explain that on various social media posts and in wherever we see the trolls showing up, we get clobbered because they have it in their minds No. Didn't you see autofocus? That's where you have to go.
Tell us about autofocus. Let's
Yeah.
dive
I
into
think it's
that.
time for yeah.
Time for a little autofocus. Go ahead, Linda. You're just dying to tell.
Autofocus, as we explained earlier, was a book written by crime writer Robert Graysmith, who actually supported our work. And did know that there was a need. He said there is a crying need for a serious biography about this person. Bob himself, to Robert Graysmith, was a crime victim, and so he focused primarily. His book focused on like the 2 weeks before, and all that, all the stuff that crime books do. And I mean, I'm not into crime. My husband hates when I watch Dateline and all that. He's like, "Oh, you're watching that creepy stuff." I'm like,
it's the best stuff.
But I watch the creepy stuff because it's real. So for Robert Graysmith, it was about the crime, and so he focused on the crime. But the problem was, as we said before as well, is that the biographical stuff, he didn't particularly. He kind of took the sources that he got at face value. Something as simple as Bob didn't graduate from high school.
Yeah.
Well, yes, he did. The vice president of his class.
Wow.
He did graduate, though. He did graduate.
Drummer boy all the time. Like Bob was active in school, loved school. Everyone in school loved what they called their drummer boy.
The drummer boy.
Their drummer boy. And he would go to reunions. And this is not somebody who didn't graduate from high school, but that means that the biographical parts of the book were tended toward inaccuracy. There might be a level of, that's a very minor thing, but there might be a level of truth somewhere in there, but the depths of it were not correct. So, for example, there's a section in the book where, and they got exploded into the movie, that says that, and came from a newspaper article, that Jeff Erdell, who was CBS New York, remind me what his position was, Carol.
He was a spokesperson for CBS, a CBS affiliate station up in New York. And so,
there you go. Yeah. So he told a newspaper after Bob died that Bob did a TV show in Canada. He was a guest on Celebrity Cooks. Which was a Canadian, like Julia Child type thing. But you remember in the 70s, cooking shows that always had guests and everybody would cook a meal and sit down and eat. You're probably too young to remember that. But it was a very big thing that they would have a celebrity come on and cook a favorite dish, and they would watch them. Here's one I prepared earlier, flew out of the oven.
Right.
Now that show, according to Jeff Erdell of New York, according to the newspaper, said that they had a hard time, nearly didn't run it because Bob cried all through it.
Wow.
He was talking about his divorce. He was horrified about what was happening. He made lots of inappropriate jokes about sex and death. And so they had real issues with this, and I could see why they weren't going to, and it was supposed to be the first episode they ran in New York when it came into the States. And then they pulled it because it was supposed to air and he was murdered like right after he died. So they just went, we're going to pull this. Now, he took that article as gospel. The problem is it's completely untrue. We spoke with, I don't know if you've read our book or if you've seen our book. There is an entire section of our book that is devoted to the interviews with 4 of the people who were on that set with Bob that day. And when Carol, now I did most of the actual interviewing because that's my forte. Yeah. So I read this article and Carol said, we've got Anne, we've got this one, we've got that one. And I said, okay, let me pull this article and figure out what the hell went wrong with his life that this was happening.
Because Bob didn't do it. Bob was not, he did not break down on set like that. He kept himself
that was so out of character.
So out of character.
That I said,
Very out of character.
Really need to find out what happened. We really need to find out what happened here. So I prepared my whole interview based on the fact that this article was true. Carol got on the phone to organize the interview. And I already had, prep. I hadn't spoken to them yet, thank God. But Carol had prepared the interview, and she said to, I think it was Anne, wasn't it?
It was Anne.
She
It was
said to
Anne Care.
"No, we
Yep.
want to talk to you about this." And what did Anne say to you?
No, 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 no way, no how, not ever, no, no.
Wow.
He was one. So we talked to the owner and producer, the stage manager, and Anne, who was she was the person that coordinated all of the celebrities. Like, she would get their limo, she would get their airfare and things like that. And so those were the ones that were in the book. And then there was the photographer who, because we have a blog that's associated with all of our work as well. And I had put up a thing on Celebrity Cooks about, how it was all wrong in this article, and how we had interviewed the three, prominent people from Celebrity Cooks. And the photographer actually got on and made a comment and said, "You're absolutely right. I was there too. And yeah, no, nothing like that happened." So and these people.
So when that was taken then as gospel in Robert Grace's book, and then transferred onto screen.
Oh
Which
no.
then made it true.
Yeah.
So that, and that John Carpenter was like his absolute best bud. He was not. He was a hanger-on, and Bob was trying to get rid of him, as in didn't want to hang around with him anymore. Knew that it was a bad thing for him. Never had this great affection for him, to the point where the people who made autofocus actually openly admitted that this film was full of deceit and distortion, because it's too boring. Find the quotes now, because I can't see
Yes,
them.
I have. Yep, I have them. I have them right in front. I have them right here. So
they knew that Bob's real life was too boring. Who wants to hear about the good Bob Crane? So let's just make up a few. Now, I'm going to send the film only one way. All biopics make some stuff up because they have to kind of fill in blanks. But
Hollywood.
They were they're not standing in the room where these conversations are being held. They have to just fill in the blanks and guess this is where it came from. But what they were doing was creating a bigger falsehood based on incorrect information that nobody bothered to fact check. Carol, do you have that?
I do.
Bob's
I do.
oldest son was actually involved in this film.
Yes.
Not his younger son, Scott, his older son, Bob,
yes,
who calls himself Bob Crane Jr., which is a load of bullpucky, because there is no Bob Crane Jr.
Okay.
There is no Bob Crane Jr. They all have different middle names, but he calls himself Bob Crane Jr. like it's a medal for him somehow. And I'm sorry, but I'm not a fan because of things like this. He thought this film was okay, and he said, "Oh, it's not a biography of my dad." It's like, well,
yeah. So I've got them right here. I'm going to read these quotes.
Read it.
They're, so, Linda and I, we always had known that there were a lot of inaccuracies, and one of Bob's very close friends actually wrote a letter to the editor to the LA Times saying, it was a distortion. This film was, he was like, this is, Bob's not here to defend himself, but I am. This is, autofocus is not the real deal. And that was one thing that we had that was published and so forth. But then what we found interviews with Paul Schrader, who, he was the director of autofocus, and he gave tons of interviews when the film came out. And so the first quote I'm going to read to you is actually a quote from Bob's son, Robert. He goes by Robert now. So his quote was, quote, "Autofocus is just Paul Schrader's take on that time. In fact, he's really not interested in my dad much as much as he stated. It's a movie. It's not the Bob Crane biography." And he said that in October of 2002, right when the movie came out.
Oh no!
So here are a string of quotes that Paul Schrader has actually said about autofocus. Now, it's disgusting because they made him a joke, and they did it on purpose, and they actively destroyed. Like, instead of trying to understand who Bob Crane was, okay, he was a sexual addict. Okay, what made him that way? Let's dig deeper, or let's look at his whole life. This was character assassination at its absolute worst. So here's a quote from Paul Schrader, one of many. The delightful irony is that this guy, Bob Crane, prides himself in creating the persona of the guy who's in on the joke, the hip guy. Well, the joke finally becomes his life, and he's the one who doesn't get it. Most of the material that came out of the film came out of the first half. You know, good Bob just wasn't as interesting as bad Bob. That sort of indicates where my interest in the story lay.
Oh my God.
Okay, that's just one. Here's another one. Fortunately, Crane wasn't that well known. Sort of like
No.
Wait.
sort of
You
like
say idiot, you know?
yeah. So then he goes to name somebody who, frankly, I don't even know. Fortunately, Crane wasn't that well known. Sort of like Jake LaMotta. You had enough room to reach into his life to create scenes and themes that would be credible and also have that power of fiction. I saw my familiar protagonist in Crane, someone who sort of laughs, he laughs, clueless, and can't line up his behavior with his self-image.
Oh my God.
That's horrible.
All right, there's another one. Here's another one. In
Stop, you're
Crane's
killing me.
in Crane's particular case, you have someone whose life would not really be worth examination. It was neither entertaining nor educational if it were not for a couple of events. John Carpenter was a part of Crane's life, but not that big a part, really. You're taking a smaller part of his life and putting it in the forefront because it was the most interesting thing that had happened to him.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, can you imagine what this guy's life is like if he thinks the most interesting thing that happens to a person is they get killed? This is why the rest of our book is so different, because there is so much more to Bob than all of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Especially people aren't going to go and do their own research. They're just going to see it.
So it says if you wanted to create a piece of fiction that was like this, use a different name and make it a full fiction.
That's literally what it sounds like. It sounds like he wanted this fun story. And so he was like, "Oh, here's someone who people know. Let's put him on the forefront."
Yeah. So that is autofocus, and that is why we dislike autofocus. Because
one
of your questions that we looked at and said, "What is your least favorite book to movie adaptation?"
Yes.
My second was like the Harry Potter and James Patterson stuff, but this one, at least they started as fiction and continued as but the book that it's based on was flawed beyond comprehension in the parts of the book that the movie chose to exploit and then twist even more, and then just threw it out there as fact. So that, like Carol said, you go online and you see anytime Bob's name comes up at the end of June, in the middle of July, because that's when he was murdered and that's when his birthday is, you go, oh yeah, but he's a creep. Oh, he was a perv. Did you see autofocus? Was like, you need to learn more about him. I'm like, you don't know who you're talking to,
right? And they don't want to. They're so, they're the keyboard warriors that sit there and they think they're being really, really funny and ha ha ha, and they know more than we do. And you lock horns with them, and you can only go so far until it really starts to kind of wear you down too, because they don't. They're doing it to get a rise, and we know that. But at the same time, you try and engage in some sort of civil conversation with them, even though it's Facebook or, whatever.
Yeah.
But, and sometimes you can get through. Sometimes they surprise you and they're like, wow, I didn't know that.
That might have an open mind and think, oh, there's this, but you say, no, but you don't know about this. Somebody else reading it might go, oh, no, I didn't know that. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, you're not.
How do you know that? Were you there? And don't really need to have been, but were you?
Yeah.
And people think that, well, you're just the authors, you're plugging your book, you just want sales. And the other thing that people don't know is that we've donated a lot of our money to charity, and we don't make tons of money on the book. Our quarterly royalties, I can't certainly live on them. We're I mean, the book sells through Amazon. It's, my publisher takes the lion's share, but the author royalties are, we have donated a lot of money to charities. We've donated, and a lot of money too that goes into doing keeping the websites up, keeping the things going, keeping, and, we do have a podcast, which, things are Linda's, we're busy, there's life,
Life.
but we're not sitting here getting rich off of Bob's murder, his death. We are here just to tell his true story. We happen to have written a book. We happen to have a publisher that has produced our book for us. And it is a book that provides the information about Bob Crane in a very, it's a very carefully, put together book. We're very proud of it. We don't paint him as a saint. We don't paint him as a devil. He was a human being, and he was somebody who, deserves for people to know that he was, a genius in radio. People don't know that. We're sitting here on a podcast today being able to talk about things because back in the 1950s and 60s, Bob was unboxing radio and was able to, do things in radio that had never been done before. He provided joy to millions on Hogan's Heroes. People laugh. We still laugh at that today. There was so much that he did with charity and music, his drums, and he cared about his family. He loved and adored his children, all of his children. He loved his friends. Bob was somebody who was not perfect. He tried to be. He tried to be perfect. And that book, we poured our heart and soul into it to tell the world what they didn't know. They think they know Bob Crane, but they don't. And we're trying to provide that. Believe me, and I know Linda will agree with this, Dee would agree with this. If Bob Crane had turned out to be a stinking pedophile, woman abuser, rapist, it would have been like, You
guys probably would have
we're done.
The reason that the stories are what they are in the book is because that is what people told us. We did not leave out the bad stuff. Right. If there's stuff in there that's unflattering, like I think there's a little bit in there from Paul Peterson and maybe
Stuart
Eddie Foy. There's some stuff in there that's not totally flattering. You know what? That's what we were told.
Yeah.
So, but the rest of the stuff, if you don't see it there, it's because it ain't there.
Not true.
It's because the other 200 people that we spoke with said, that's not the Bob I knew.
Because you're not trying to fabricate it.
Exactly.
My kids lost their dad when my oldest was 4. And so when you said, when you said that Bob's youngest was 8, and that just means it means so much to me because if you guys didn't do what you did, he would know his dad through autofocus. And now he has all the truth. And it's just I love it. And I'm so appreciative of you ladies. Thank you.
His daughter calls our book the Bible.
Yes.
I love that.
Something about dates and times or whatever about her dad. She says, let me go get the Bible.
I love that.
That's sweet.
But they know that we researched everything.
The main thing we would love you guys to share where we can find all your stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
so
we could do the wrap up with her, but
so yes, you can find all of our work.
I will say goodbye. I have in-laws here ready.
No, you're good.
Yeah,
You're good.
Of course.
It
was so fun talking with you. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Linda.
Bye, darling.
So you can find the book at voteforbobcrane.org. It's vote, the number 4, bobcrane.org. The reason for the vote for Bob Crane is that we petitioned for his inclusion in the Radio Hall of Fame. And so people, there is a public voting that occurs from time to time, from year to year. And so that just kind of became a kind of a catchphrase. And so that became the website. So vote, the number 4, bobcrane.org. There you'll find our book. You'll find our podcast. You'll find our YouTube channel, which has radio shows from when Bob was in radio. Most of them are from KNX, where he was doing celebrity interviews, and also, his different style of radio where he was messing with the commercials, he would call it. So it's kind of like role. So he would enhance the commercials and add his flair to them and make them like stories, or he would add music, or he would do all kinds of things and make fun of them, not make fun, but make a sport out of them, so that people would actually stay and not turn the dial and listen to the commercials because they were part of his show. And then also our podcast, the book, you can get the book. There are links to the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and our publisher. You know, all of the things that we do to keep Bob's memory alive. And of course, when this podcast is produced, we'll have that podcast as well. All of our books are up there. And so voteforbobcrane.org is where you can get everything from, you know, about Bob Crane from us.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I know, yes.
Linda and I do tend to take over, so
that's
it was so easy. Usually in interviews, I'm always like, especially when me and Allie aren't in the same room, I'm like, are you gonna ask next or am I?
Yeah.
So there's this like awkward silence.
Perfect. Yeah.
we just roll. and we
I
knew
loved
Linda
it.
had to leave, and you know, so it's like, okay, we're just gonna go in like gangbusters. But we can also, like I said earlier, we can talk about Bob as easily as we can talk about our own lives. And, you know, it's just embedded in us now. We've made wonderful friends with so many people from his life. Many of them are gone now. His cousin has passed. His best friend from high school, Charlie Zito, he passed many years ago. And these people really became very, very, very special to us. His family, his son, Scott, his daughter, Karen, they are very, very special to us. And we are very protective of them because we see what is out there. And so we kind of try and shield, I guess might be a good word, as best we can, so that, you know, they're living their lives. They've lived with this for their whole lives. But it doesn't change the fact that they love their dad. They love their father so much, and they want him to be remembered for the father that they knew and loved. He was just dad to them. You know, he just happened to be famous. He just happened to be a celebrity. They just happened to live in Hollywood. But to them, he was dad. One of your questions was, what book would you like to be made into a movie? We would we would love our book, maybe not a movie, but a documentary, you know, a series of, you know, let's take it from birth to death and, you know, show the world who he really was through the eyes of all of these people who knew him. And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't just one person or two people or three people that, hey, what did you think of Bob Crane? You know, and, you know, one person from radio, one person from school, you know, it was so many people. And, you know, Linda would get on these calls and we would be nervous because we didn't know what they were going to say.
Right.
And we didn't know. We liked Bob Crane. We liked Hogan's Heroes. We were like, oh, geez, you know, what's going to happen?
Are we going to uncover something we don't like?
Exactly. It was nerve-wracking. And looking in on Bob Crane, people should look more for the whole story and not just the trifecta of headlines. You know, Hogan's Heroes, sex, murder. And that's why we're here.
No, I love it because I think too many people just with unfortunately, every murder story, typically they focus in on what the headlines are. They don't look at the whole story. They don't look at the life. And so if what am I trying to say? If things that you don't want to find come out, they tend to focus on that. And then that becomes the whole person's identity.
It does.
And that's just not okay, especially when Hollywood's going to end up making a whole entire movie about it and blow that out.
That movie, it never should have been made. And, you know, people, yes, it's a biopic. Yes, it's Hollywood. Yes, it's going to take liberties. We all understand that. But the degree, and it's a shame because I like Greg Kinnear. I really like Greg Kinnear.
I love Greg Kinnear too. Yeah.
He played Bob Crane in this movie. It's a shame that he took that role. That movie, I think, had a 20-year anniversary re-release, like out in Hollywood, where he did a Q&A after it.
Oh no!
And it's like, you know, buddy, no.
Oh, that's horrible.
So, you know, and again, it's you know, it was a movie that they made to make money, which, yeah, fine.
Yeah.
That's what movies do. You make money for a studio, for a producer, whatever. But, you know, when you're damaging somebody's legacy the way that this one did on purpose, without any regard to the facts, and just throwing things in there because it'll be, funny or, salacious. It's just
entertaining.
It's just a train wreck. And people who see it, they see it because it's like, oh boy, Hogan's Heroes. Yes, I know he was murdered, but I love Hogan's Heroes. And they go and they see it, and it's like, what did I just watch?
Well, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I've learned so much from you.
Seriously.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It's fun. We love to talk.
course.
We love to talk about Bob. I think we love to just talk. But if you ever want to have us back on, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But this has been really fun. And on behalf of Dee Young too, and Linda, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Yes. All right.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Allie, how'd you enjoy that true crime?
I did not feel true crime. It was so like informative of his life. Which is what they wanted. Like, they didn't want to focus on the murder. They didn't want to focus on, they focused on his whole life. And so that was super, like, I would loved it.
I would love it.
No, I was about to say like 3 different sentences, so I just cut it and was like, I loved it.
Yeah, that was really fun. I enjoyed it. Yeah, so thanks to Carol and Linda for being on the episode.
Yes.
And I don't want to look up what's coming out after this. So Monday, we have an awesome episode for you.
Yep.
Do I know what it is? No.
Take a listen.
Yeah. We hope you enjoyed this. And all right. Well, with that, this interview
went off script.
Bye.
Thanks for sticking with us.
We hope you enjoyed it.
If you did, we would greatly appreciate it if you gave us 5 beautiful stars, reviewed, and subscribed.
You can also follow us on Facebook at Offscript, on Instagram at Offscript Podcast 21, and on TikTok at Offscript_pod.
Shout outs to Madame Shen Creations for our adorable logo art.
And Adam Daniel for our incredible theme song.
And to Creative Cinephile Productions for producing our podcast.
See you next time.